Hey y'all, welcome to the Clock Tower. I'm Colton here with Brandon. We have a couple more BSF Trios regionals to talk about, as well as an update on the Hololive PR pack, so we'll get right into it. Two tournaments this weekend, one in Lille, France, one near Atlanta, Georgia. A lot of the same kind of stuff that we've seen in previous tournaments. In France, we saw Slime Bang Dream MTI at number one, Slime Quintuplets and 8 Choice Dal in second, MTI, Love Live, and Attack on Titan in third, Sword Art, Goblin Slayer, and Data Live 8 Standby in fourth. Not as much MTI dominance in France. Only 4 of the 8 teams had a Mushoku Tensei list, which was still, as far as I can tell, the most representation a single set had in France in the top 8.
We did get the full representation from that tournament. All 13 teams have the set accounted for, and there were 7 Mushoku Tenseis to begin with, and of that, 4 of them were able to make top 8. So
this is one of the few times that we actually have conversion rate for a trios tournament. And Mushoku Tensei's conversion rate was essentially, 57%. Again, super small sample size, but 4 out of 7 in top 8. Slime performs well. 2 8-choice lists on the first and second place teams, respectively. 3 different Love Live Sunshine stock soul lists as well. The stock soul door, Riko Chika Yo, continuing to show out. A couple of first-timers in top 8 as well. We had Contact Collection and Cardcaptor Sakura each being represented in top 8, none of them making top 4. So aside from, kind of like the broad overlook, what are you noticing about this top 8, Brandon?
really noticing that, especially with this top 8, there's less standby. The main culprit being, of course, Mushoku Tensei, but really only one other standby list even in that kind of slot.
Yeah, I think that this is in part a delineation between the North American and European metas. There just isn't as much standby in Europe. There's still obviously a lot of standby in Europe, but whereas in the US, you'll see almost every team running, some kind of standby, some of them running 2 different standby lists, most of them, if not all of them, on MTI. In Europe, we're not seeing that as much. If you look back through, especially at the Belgium regional, there just isn't as much standby there either. There are 2 MTI lists in the top 4, 4 total in the top 8, but there are, very few 8 standby lists. Those are the only 4 8 standby lists in top 8 from Belgium. So we don't really see that trend in Germany. There was quite a bit of standby in Germany. But I'm also noticing that the smaller tournaments, it seems, tend to have less standby as well. France and Belgium both had, they had 13 and 15 teams respectively. But once you get tournaments that are 20 teams or more, you start to see a lot more standby. So those are the most interesting correlations, I think, as we start to get a broader picture of the trio's metadata. And that demonstrates itself in the Atlanta regional. There were 30 teams at the Atlanta regional and a whole lot more standby and a whole lot more MTI. 6 MTI lists making top 8, including 3 in top 4. A lot of other standby as well. Slime 8 standby showing up a couple of times. Ruby 8 standby. Adventure Time had some standby. So a lot more standby in, again, a US regional and a bigger regional. MTI, Quintuplets, and Slime taking first. Quintuplets, MTI, and Bang Dream second. Bang Dream, Sword Art, and Slime in third. Fate, MTI, and Ruby in fourth. Quintuplets had a really good weekend. 3 appearances in top 2 between the 2 tournaments. Is this an outlier, or is it a sign that Quintuplets has finally solved how to be more relevant in this meta?
Yeah, we're able to see a couple different lists here, the door choice and bar choice lists making it to the top. Bar choice kind of being that definitively meta list, making it into first is really impressive. And then 2 places in second. It has a lot of potential with the deck, so I'm glad that it's getting pilots that are able to bring it to that next level. That we were able to see this build before set 2 comes out later this year.
Yeah, Quintuplets really struggled at Springfest. It definitely underperformed. Probably the biggest underperformer of Springfest was Quintuplets in terms of like expectation versus what it delivered. So cool to see that people are still on it and that they are piloting it and that they have found ways to, win enough games into standby, because if you're going to be on a first place team in a US regional, you have to be able to beat standby. So Quintuplets has clearly figured something out in terms of its approach to playing into things like MTI and Slime and Ruby. So good on them. Both the winners this weekend were teams that had won a previous regional. So the ENTCG, SBTCG team winning in Europe, and the Chicago-based team winning in Georgia. So congratulations to both of them on winning another regional. I anticipate that we'll probably see those teams again as early as the next set of tournaments over Memorial Day weekend, because we'll have a Budapest regional where, again, MTI is not playable. So it'll be very interesting to see. Europe is already a little less into standby and MTI. We'll see how that plays into the way that things roll out in Hungary. And then we have 2 US regionals that weekend as well. One in Newark, New Jersey, just outside of New York City, and the other in Puerto Rico. So a big weekend coming up, end of May, May 29th, 3 different regionals happening. And we will be following that very closely and talking about how those go in a few weeks. But for the time being, looking at the overall representation table, obviously MTI still far and away the favorite. Nearly 71% of all teams have Mushoku Tensei. Bang Dream, another solid weekend. Showed up in a lot of places, right? It had its fair share of tops, 3 top 4s as well. So 19 total appearances over the first 6 tournaments. That places it in second. Slime, still kind of trying to find its identity, it feels like. I think that 8 standby Slime is still the most effective list, but we're seeing 8 choice Slime show up. We're seeing the old Pants Salvage Slime as well. So a few different slime lists to be on the lookout for, none of which have dominated, but together they've done quite well. Slime 8 Choice going 1-2 in France, while Pants Salvage and 8 Standby both made a couple of appearances in top 8 in Atlanta. So a lot of different looks for Slime. Between the 3 of them, we have 18 represented through the first 6 tournaments. Ruby, the only other one in double digits. A quarter of all teams in top 8 have had a Ruby list. And then you have Love Live Sunshine and Fate, followed by Dal, which showed up with an 8 standby in top 4 this weekend. So worth keeping an eye on. It decided to play the Brainstorm, and it worked out pretty well for them. Kaguya, and of course Quintuplets, now having its best weekend, is up into the top 10.
It's worth noting, especially these last 2 tournaments, where the teams were repeat winners from previous regionals already. So seeing some players being able to consistently bring these decks forward into competitive play and to the top spot, I really think also says a lot about the players too.
Yeah, and some repeats are going to show up in the data as well, right? Like if someone brings Mushoku Tensei to a couple of different tournaments and they top both times, that means the MTI is going to show up more times. But obviously, there are reasons why the best players in the world are playing the decks that they're playing. So if you're winning tournaments or you're consistently topping, then, the choice you make is clearly a choice that we need to pay attention to. So I think the data makes sense so far. It kind of tracks with what we had expected, more or less, so far. It's shaking out in a way that I don't think is surprising, really, to anyone. I mean, there are a couple of things, that I don't think I expected Bang Dream to necessarily be number 2 at this point. I would have probably said it was number 3. But, overall, there aren't a ton of surprises here. And as much as, we're starting to see more tournaments, this is still a weird sample, right? We only have a total of 144 decks to talk about on 48 teams. So still not a huge sample size, but we're getting a better sample size now. But the trio's rules being what they are, it limits teams to, only having one copy of a thing. We talked about all this at length before, so we're not going to get into it again. But the point is, I think we're starting to see a data set that reflects what the meta actually is. And again, this is our last tournament weekend without Hololive. We are going to see an explosion of Hololive on May 29th. At all three of these regional tournaments, we'll probably be seeing Hololive. So, who knows? Like, the data is going to get very, very interesting. It's almost like we're starting a brand new data set because Hololive is going to change the way that people approach this meta.
Yeah, just the fact that MTI's representation is almost doubled, like Slime's, essentially the next tier down of representation, is just still kind of mind-boggling in a sense that where it's only limited to one per team, that the number of that specific deck is nearly doubled.
Keep printing broken things and people will keep playing them. So moving on, one final thing we want to talk about. Bushiroad has announced how they're going to distribute the Hololive PR packs, and it's not inspired, to say the least. In order to get one of these Hololive PR packs that we've talked about before, they're the ones that have, the two drop searchers in them. One is base rarity and one is a higher rarity. In order to get one of those PR packs, you need to buy 3 trial decks or a booster box. I'm going to be honest, that sucks.
I'm going to be interested to see if that's going to continue to be that way. This initially feels like an overreaction to witnessing some stores selling it off as opposed to giving it out as an incentive to purchase from them. So we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, I don't really get why Bushiroad is doing this, gonna be honest. Like, they've already made their sales. But if a local game store is, trying to sell off their own PR packs because people aren't buying the Hololive product off their shelves, so they're gonna sell the PR packs, they're gonna rip them and, sell their contents online. I don't know. I'm not gonna, I've said this many times on the show, I am not good at the business factory, but it seems to me that local game stores know what they need to do to make their profits. And I would rather see a local game store rip those packs and sell them online. Personally, me getting a PR pack of 2 potentially, very low value PRs is not incentive for me to drop $50 on a box or 3 trial decks. Like, that's not an incentive for someone like me. And obviously for whales it will be, right? There are going to be people out there who buy 30 trial decks to just rip 10 PR packs and, fine, I guess. But I don't think this makes a lot of sense from any perspective. Like, it would be way cooler on Bushiroad's part if they would just be distributing these PR packs as PRs. Even just PR packs, just hand them out for people who showed up, right? They're a simple profile that everyone's going to have easy access to already. Like, the secondary market doesn't give Bushiroad more money. I don't really know why they're doing this. Doesn't feel like it makes sense to me. Maybe there's something I'm missing, but this just feels like Bushiroad is being arbitrarily difficult. And until I have a good reason to, if I see a local game store selling PR packs, no, I didn't. And that's it for us. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back on Thursday with 5 cards, 5 minutes. We're going to talk about stuff from the extra booster set for Hololive. Next week, Weiss 101, followed by gameplay, and in 2 weeks, another clock talk. No idea what we're going to talk about then. There won't be another tournament between now and then, so we'll come up with something. Until next time, thank you so much for joining us. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe, and have a good one.
We'll see you then.